Going. Jesus loves you. So, I used to be involved in witchcraft, and I used to worship the devil. Lord, forgive me. My family was involved in satanic practices going back most likely thousands of generations. If you look into the family tree, when I did my deliverance session, I saw a mirror facing a mirror representing all the generations that worshipped a certain goddess, which I will not name, because God says don't even let their names be in your mouth. So that's some good wisdom to live by. And so this was in my family. It was passed down to me. Okay, people in my family practiced it. And I believe essentially I was initiated into it, like literally initiated into it at a young age. And I practiced it to varying degrees. I wasn't, super adept or anything. I'm not like, John Ramirez, who was a satanic Santeria priest. I wasn't that much into it. But regardless, I did it, right? And I dabbled, you could say. What does that look like? Well, seances, praying to the devil, things like that. Now, let me just say right off the bat that I am saved today. God has pulled me out of that stuff. In fact, I was pulled out of that even before I was saved. When I became a religious through another religion and through the 12-step program, I stopped doing all that stuff. So I haven't done that stuff in a very, very long time. And now that I'm saved, I'm really away from that stuff. And I'm on the opposite team now. Now I'm on the winning team. And what comes with that? Somebody who was involved in these practices and then becomes Christian, especially if it's in the family line. What do you think comes with that? That's right. Spiritual warfare. Right? Let's go. That's what happens, right? Because you were part of the kingdom of darkness. And now you're part of the kingdom of light. And they're very angry, right? They lost you. They lost. They literally lost a soul. It reminds me of that song, that Christian song, which has such awesome, bold lyrics. And it's so true. It says, you guys probably know this song, right? Hell lost another one. I am free. I am free. I am free. Right? Yes, hell lost another one. I am free. I am free. I mean, just think of that concept. I remember hearing that and it just hitting me like what they're saying. It's just so bold. It reminds me of the old gargoyles they used to have on Gothic churches in the Catholic world, right? In the Catholic Church. And the gargoyles were supposedly there, and sometimes they had their tongue out, right? And they were supposedly there taunting Satan because he can't touch us because we're under the blood of Christ. And, right, there's nothing to worry about. So at the time I thought, hey, that's kind of, I don't know, kind of seemed, what's the word, presumptuous, but especially from the Catholic view, I think it is somewhat presumptuous, depending on what your theology is and how secure you are in relying on the blood of Jesus. But when it comes to actually believing in the gospel, now you're under the blood, it's true. Hell lost another one. I am free. Hell lost another one. They're losing. They're losing on this. So, when I came to Christ, I repented of all that activity, right? And like I said, I found God first and foremost through a 12-step program, and I had a spiritual awakening that showed me, hey, Wolfie, how you doing, buddy? You're beautiful. I like your eyes. Really nice blue eyes on that wolf dog. And he ran right up. He didn't even bark. You're a good boy or girl. Or I shouldn't assume your gender, but you ever assume a dog's gender? How would you even tell without seeing? But I guess we do assume dogs' genders. Anyway, side note. Digression. Okay, so when through that 12-step process, I had a spiritual awakening where I had an experience with this higher power called God. And I got freed from addiction, from various addictions. And I stayed freed. How? Through the power of God. Straight up. I surrendered my life to God. And I followed a process which helps me stay in a surrendered state, and the necessary things that I need to do to stay in that surrendered state so that God can intervene, remove the obsession of my mind to use to do whatever it is that I shouldn't be doing. And boom, it worked. Okay. Now, I had been reading religious books at that time. I was reading the Quran. I was reading the Hare Krishna scriptures mainly. Some Buddhist books. I was really interested in religion. Before that, I was agnostic. Before that, I was Catholic. Right? So I was brought up Catholic. And at some point, I left the faith and became very liberal in my thinking and thought that religions start all the wars. Why would I follow this stuff? That was kind of through college. You know, I was a in a circle kind of guy, if you know what I'm saying. You know, don't want to mess with the algorithm with that word, and I had no need for God or religion or anything. Okay, then my senior year of college, I met my ex-girlfriend, whose name is Lauren. She went by Lula, and she was a Hare Krishna, and she believed in God very staunchly. So she was super religious. When I met her, I mean, I had known her through friends, but I never spoke to her. I didn't have interaction with her, but she was friends of my friends. But the first time I talked to her, we were at this party at my friend's house in Philly, and she's sitting on the couch in a sari. So if you guys don't know, right, the sari is those kind of nice flowing dresses that the women wear in India and in Hinduism and a lot of those cultures and religions. And, you know, it mostly covers most of the body. Sometimes it has a head wrap. And they're pretty, you know, they're different, like beautiful colors, and you can kind of show out in a sari. Some of them are cut off, but whatever. Not supposed to do that or whatever. But so she's wearing like a full sari, and it's not a burqa. Okay, it's a little more stylish than a burqa, you would say, and a little more freedom there. But she's wearing that. Everybody else is drinking, getting drunk. She's not doing anything. She's not drinking nothing. And I'm like, man, now I had already had her in my mind for years. I felt like I was in love with her before I even spoke to her. It's a whole other story. But when I saw that really was like, whoa, this person has something different. What's going on with that, right? And I sat there and I put on Bikini Kill Rebel Girl. If you guys know that band Bikini Kill from the 90s. Right? It was a riot girl band. I love female bands. So I'm rocking Rebel Girl by Bikini Kill to try to like talk to her, impress her, or get her attention, or open the conversation, right? Because she looked to me like a rebel girl. She had super short hair, tattoos. She had half sleeves on both arms. She has piercings. You know what I mean? I don't remember what color her hair was at that time, but at some point it was pink. That was my favorite. Blue. You know, sometimes she would just go back to the bleach blonde. So whatever. I already knew her as like a punk rock girl, whatever you want to call it. You know? Like somebody different. Like somebody who understood that, you know, this world ain't like what it's cracked up to be, right? And that was kind of me. I'm punk rock in my thinking, and I'm hip hop in my thinking, right? These are cultural movements and artistic mind states, right? Punk rock is a state of mind. Hardcore is a state of mind. Hardcore is do it yourself, right? Whatever you feel called to do, grassroots, you do that. You know, family, friends, that's hardcore. You know what I'm saying? Hardcore is a style of music, but it's also like a way of life. You know, I remember when I started working with children as a preschool teacher, I was listening to hardcore music on my break, and I was taking a walk around Brooklyn, and I walked back into the preschool room, and it was like ding, 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 ding. You know, it'd be like all like children's music, like Baby Shark, doo, 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 Baby Shark. Doo, doo. It wasn't Baby Shark back then, but you know, and it felt like such a contrast from the heavy, you know, hardcore. I was probably listening to 108, which is like a Hare Krishna hardcore band, Krishna core. And then just like, boom, it was like such a contrast. But at the same time, I realized like, no, this is the same thing. Because hardcore is all about doing what you love, what you feel passionate about, like making a change in this world, staking your claim. We can't change everything in this world. You know, I just watched a movie about John Lennon, and they had given all this money to this special needs school that the children were being totally abused in. And he said, you know, we're going to do this thing. He says, there's so many things to do in the world. We want to change the world. He says, where does one start? Where do you start? And this is where we're going to start, right? And it reminded me of a preschool I worked at where they were abusing the children. And I had to speak up about that, right? So there's things that we do. We're all called to, in different ways. And so I believe we should use our talents. We should follow those callings, right? So for me, hardcore is like following your calling. You know, that's hardcore. Like, I mean, in the sense of the movement. You know what I mean? I used to be part of the straight edge movement too. Straight edge hardcore, where they don't use drugs or drink. That was back in high school. I did that. Then I went off on that, you know. So anyway, I'm playing. Oh, and also hip hop, right? So for me, like punk rock, hip hop, hardcore, these are all like states of mind. They're a culture. There's language, right? There's understandings. There's philosophy. There's, in some cases, theology, right? Because in hip hop, you have the 5%er movements through like Wu-Tang and the Poor Righteous Teachers and other, you know, Muslim groups, which came through New York City and started this new lingo, right? Like the word, when people say word, the word comes from the 5% nation, you know, which I think it means like, actually, I don't want to repeat it right now, but so anyway, I'm playing Rebel Girl. I start talking to Lauren for the first time, and I said, what's this Hare Krishna thing about? This is the very first thing I asked her. Now, I had been interested in Hare Krishna in the past. When I was 14, I got a book called Chant and Be Happy. It had John Lennon and Prabhupada, the guru of the Hare Krishna movement, on it. And I was like, oh, cool, you know, it's like about music or whatever. I had no idea what it was about. The devotee of the Hare Krishna who was I was at Warped Tour in the line. This guy literally put the book in my hand. All I remember is I'm standing in line, like just waiting for the concert to start or whatever. And just boom, I got this book in my hand. I'm like, okay. I'm like, oh, cool. Yeah, I'll take this book. Thank you. And he's like, okay, I want money. And I'm like, take your book. Get out of here. Right? I got angry because I'm like, what are you asking for money for? Take the book. You know, I didn't want your book. You gave it to me. Then later in concert, I'm moshing. I'm watching probably, dang, who was that Warped Tour back then? I mean, No Effects always played. Glassjaw played one year. That was one of my favorite bands. Deftones. I don't think Deftones played. That was one of my favorite bands also. But like Tsunami Bomb, that's a female-fronted punk group. The Donnas, I probably think played. I would still pay to see the Donnas today. Anyway, I'm moshing. I take a break. I see the book out of the corner of my eye. It's in the mud. I said, "Yo, that's the book." So I take the book. I got the Hare Krishna book. Okay. Whoa, this is like it seemed spiritual. I didn't know it at the time, right? But it seemed like serendipitous, right? Like, oh, that's wild, you know. So I take the book home. I read it. It was super deep philosophy. What kind of went over my head. I'm only 14 years old, but it planted some kind of seeds about God, about, you know, basic morality, basic religious principles. Now, before this, right, what do I have? I have the Catholic Church on one hand, which is not really, I guess it taught me kind of similar things. I shouldn't talk too bad about it, but I just feel like I didn't get too much from it. You know, maybe I'm not seeing what I got from it. But on the other hand, I got my mother, who is a saved believer my entire life. She got saved in prison when I was probably like 2 years old. Yeah, because I have a letter that I wrote to her while she was in prison, which is absolutely heartbreaking. It's the stuff of movies and Joni Mitchell songs. Joni Mitchell has like 2 songs about like children and divorce, and you know, and like Pat Benatar songs, right? Hell is for Children. All right, this is a music video apparently, guys. I'm music name dropping and song name dropping. Hell is for children. If you guys haven't heard that song, definitely check it out. Not many songs about child abuse, but that's one of them. It's very powerful. Also, the song Names by Cat Power is another good song about child abuse, but be careful on that one because that one's very depressing and very sad, and in fact, I wouldn't even listen to that as a Christian. But, so, yeah, basically, I have my mom in my life. She's praying for me. She gave me a Bible. I remember as a child, I'm walking around with a Bible and a cross. I loved it. I don't even know why. But I loved, whatever my mom was telling me about, Jesus. Because she was constantly talking to me about Jesus. Constantly mentioning Jesus. And, my mom, she never called herself a Christian. And at some point, I asked her that down the road. Mom, you're a Christian, but you never call yourself that? You don't say you're Christian? You don't kind of claim that? Why is that? She says, Mark, I don't... Christians do a lot of things, say a lot of things, believe a lot of things that I don't agree with. I don't really, I forget exactly how she said it, but you know what I'm saying, right? She didn't want to necessarily be associated with that label or those people. She says, I just believe in Jesus, right? I just follow Jesus. I know Jesus, right? She used to get jealous and angry when people would talk about Jesus in the meetings because she was so intimately connected to her Lord that hearing somebody else talk about her Lord, she would basically get jealous. Why are you talking about my Lord? You don't know him. You don't know my Lord. I know him. What do you know? I just think that's hilarious. It's awesome. And it's true. You know what I'm saying? Our God is a jealous God. And sometimes we get those godly qualities and that godly fervor. You know what I'm saying? Even righteous indignation can sometimes be sent from God, I believe. At least in principle, So, I got my mom there. She's telling me about the gospel and Jesus. And she had powerful experiences growing up with Jesus coming to her and speaking to her when she was 6 years old. And, she gave her life to Christ at 6. I'll never love any man. You are my Lord. Even though she did get married, etc., as her main love is still Jesus. Don't matter who it is. Even me, I'm her son. She probably loves me more than anybody other than my sister, obviously, and now my nieces and nephews, I'm sure. But still God is number one, right? Still God is first. She loves God more. She loves Jesus more. Yes, that's the way it should be. God first, right? Then family. So I had her influence. My dad and my stepmom, who I was raised with, they didn't get saved till later, and they gave me some basic ideas about God too, and we did have to go to church every Sunday, but I learned a lot from my mom. And so I had all those seeds, right? And then my dad later does get saved, and that was amazing. And I remember having a conversation with him in the car about that, and he's like, what are your thoughts on religion and God? And I'm like, man, because I'm a liberal college student at this point in New York, eventually moved to New York City, one of my favorite places in the world. Man, religion starts all the wars. It's done nothing but divide. It hasn't helped anybody. Or what good has it done? I've seen mostly bad. And he said, religion hasn't done that. That's people. People have done that, which was a cool response. Right? But I wasn't ready at that point, right? And when my dad found the Hare Krishna book when I was 14, he threw it out the door. He threw it out the window. He said, this is a cult. What are you doing? You can't read this stuff. Right? And then God even used that. The rebellion side of me was well, if dad doesn't like it, then it must be something to it. Right? So God uses everything, even what the devil does, right? Was it the devil who put that book in my hand? Was it God? I don't know the answers to these things. It's complex, but it's also intertwined, right? In a sense, doesn't the devil work for God? Yeah, he's against God, sure, yeah. But God doesn't really have an enemy. There's no enemy. There's no match for God. Right? People sometimes have that Satan as his enemy. Well, God don't have no enemies. Satan was his creation. He's just in rebellion. And so you got to make the decision, right? So I believe God uses everything. Right? And he used my ex-girlfriend, Lauren, to bring me to him. I believe that. Even though it was through Hare Krishna, a totally pagan, satanic, essentially, religion. Because these religions are satanic whether you realize it or not. They may not be outright satanic, as it was when I was doing seances and, putting on a red bulb in my room and kind of convening with Satan. Oh, Lord, forgive me for saying that. I hope it's okay I'm saying this. I always pray about these videos. But like I said, it didn't go that deep, thank God. There were no, sacrifices or anything, thank you, God. And you know what I mean? But some of the philosophy, it's like, yeah. So there were a little bit things like that. And then, I remember one time I was tuning in on the radio and I found it sounded like a satanic ritual. It was so weird. I was looking for WSOU, Seton Hall Pirate Radio, which is a metal station in New Jersey. And it was in between that station and the other one is while I had the red light on, and my intentions were to pray to this being. I wasn't praying. I was just, rebelliously looking for something and sitting and doing and just sitting in the presence. It wasn't a direct worshiping Satan thing, but it was the red light, and then somehow I got into this thing and I heard a dog being slaughtered on this radio broadcast. It was crazy. And that was when I was a teenager, right? So flash forward, I'm at this party. So I start talking to my soon-to-be girlfriend, Lauren. She gives me the Hare Krishna books. She brings me to some home programs. She shows me a picture of Krishna. I remember, as soon as she showed me the picture of Krishna, my first thought was, maybe I could believe in God again. What is that? Right? Now, as a Hare Krishna, you believed, see, Krishna is God, and you always knew it, and you always remembered him. Right? It reminds me of this Rainer Maria song, one of my favorite bands. And me and my girlfriend Lauren loved them, and we went to see them, and we got to meet the singer, this awesome girl who plays bass and sings. Her voice is so sick. And there was a song called Ears Ring, right? And it says, have faith in the blue lady. Strange how the ears ring after a night of wrongdoing. Strange how the arms sting when you're left holding nothing. You need contact daily. Your conscience is failing. And you already know her. And she says that over. You already know her. So my girlfriend was convinced this song is about Krishna. Even though Krishna's not a lady. He looks like a lady. Blah, blah, blah. We meet her. We ask her. She says, yes, it's about any deity or God that you believe in. Okay, so all these things, man, were working in my life, man. God was in music my entire life. I grew up, like I said, listening to hip-hop, listening to Wu-Tang Clan. I remember being in Seaside Heights, New Jersey, walking on the boardwalk, and these white guys got this boombox, and they're playing Wu-Tang Forever, right when it came out. And I think it dropped in 2001, I believe. And they're just playing Wu-Tang Forever, which, if you guys know, the first track on Wu-Tang Forever is Papa Wu, and it's essentially a lecture about God and how to take care of your family and stop abusing the black woman and take care of our children and get off the drugs and deep stuff. And it's just a beat and the guy's just talking. It's not even music necessarily. More like spoken word. And I just remember these white guys looking they're playing the album because they liked it and they bought it, and they're just looking at puzzled and inquisitive and listening and learning. It was wild. I'm yo, what? Right? And then my dad took me to see Wu-Tang with Rage Against the Machine and Atari Teenage Riot. Oh man, that was one of the best concerts of my life. When I saw Bjork in Coney Island, that was another one of the best of my life. Anyway, and when I saw Sia in Phoenix, that was amazing too. She's an awesome performer live. So anyway, God was always working through my life, because if you listen to the Wu-Tang lyrics, it's all about God. Well, it's not all about God, but they talk about God a lot, right? So it was always there. Then I was getting into that kind of 5%er stuff. I was looking into that. Even the Black Hebrew Israelites. I used to talk to those guys in New York and all around. Whenever I see them, I would debate with them and talk to them. They're yeah, I kind of agree with what you're saying. Some of the stuff, whatever. So God was always there, And then I find Hare Krishna, and that opened me up to God. So that was a step. There's all steps to this thing. There's levels. You can't go right. I mean, some people can, whatever. It's different for everybody. But for me, that was my walk. That was my story. I had to go to Hare Krishna first. Okay, I'm studying those scriptures. I'm getting super interested, right? It's opening my mind about God. I mean, Hare Krishna is all about God. It's all about surrender to God. It's very religious. If it was true, it'd be an awesome religion. But unfortunately, it's not true because they take you away from Christ, right? But I'm doing it, and it's helping me, I feel, and I'm surrendering to God, You know, I'm getting closer to Him. I'm doing these religious practices. I start being vegetarian. I stay vegetarian for like 12, 13, maybe probably 15 years. Right? I start chanting this mantra. I start praying more. I start worshiping in the temple. I start serving others. I start helping others. Right? I start dressing differently, talking differently. It's changing my life, and I feel like I'm becoming a better person. Right? Then I go to the 12-step program. Then I have a real experience with this God. Why? Because I was able to stop doing something that I didn't want to do, that I was not able to stop on my own power, and boom, God removed it from me. All right? So, when you come to Christ, in a sense, you're staking your claim on whose team you are. And there may be spiritual warfare. We just stay strong in the faith. I believe the more we're obedient to Him and His law, the less spiritual warfare or more victory we will have. Okay? Right? Following Torah helps us become purified, victorious over sin. The demons won't bother us as much, or they may bother us more, right? It's a tricky kind of thing. When I say following Torah, I don't mean all 600, right? I mean essentially the moral Torah. The parts of the Torah or the teachings and the law that were based on morality, which as Christians we are supposed to and should follow today. The moral law. The ceremonial law, however, is done away with. We don't have to do the ceremonies, all the stuff having to do with the priesthood, the temple, the diet, potentially the dress, right? Israel was supposed to do things to separate themselves from others. We don't necessarily have to do that, right? And we don't have to do any of it. We're not under the law. But the moral law is still in action, right? When you look at when Paul said to the Gentiles, hey, you know, you're justified by faith. You don't have to do all these things that the Jews do. But keep in mind, the Jews still do them. Why? Well, because they're called to do that. God said this will be a sign between me and you forever. So that means the Jews will forever do these things. Doesn't mean that Christians have to do these things. No, he was talking to the Jews when he said that the Sabbath was a sign between me and you forever. Seventh-day Adventists love to use that verse, right? Oh, he's talking to God's people. That he's talking about everybody. Everybody is a sign between him and all his believers forever. Okay, but there's another verse that says that Passover is a sign between him and his people forever and ever. And most Seventh-day Adventists don't follow Passover. Not only do that, but they hate the feast days. You know, I shouldn't say they hate them, but they do not believe in following them. And if you do follow them, they're going to kind of rail on you and tell you you're being legalistic. That's kind of hilarious. For SDAs to say that, because that's too much for them, right? They're super legalistic, but that's too much. Doing a little Passover, oh gosh forbid. So, guys, God forgives us of everything when we come to Him. All our sins, all my Satan worship is on the cross right now. Thank you, Jesus. All my witchcraft stuff, light as a feather, stiff as a board, all that stuff. Charlie, I didn't do that, but that's what the kids do nowadays, right? Some of the kids I work with were telling me that they do Charlie. And I had a conversation, you know what I'm saying? These are first, second, third graders. And I'm like, I had heard about Charlie, which if you don't know, it's basically a makeshift Ouija board with 2 pencils. And they call out to this spirit. And they ask questions and they write yes or no or whatever letters. And the pencil will start to move. Yeah, you should not be doing that. Because demons are real, spirits are real. And if you call out to them and you give them your attention and you ask them, best believe they might show up. They love that stuff. They love attention, don't they? So we ain't supposed to give them attention. God said, like I said, don't even have their names in your mouth. Don't even repeat them. Don't give them that esteem, right? Don't give them that credit. So I talked to my students, and one of the girls is a believer. She had a Bible on her desk one day, and I said, "Is that a children's Bible?" She said, "Yeah." I said, "Wow, you read the Bible?" Yeah. I love Jesus. We were talking about Easter, you know. One of my students who's also Christian, she's actually born again Christian. The other girl is Catholic. She asked me to write her a letter. It was right before Easter. She said, "Can you help me write a letter to Jesus?" And I'm like, "Yeah, of course, right?" So she just wrote this beautiful letter to Jesus. "Thank you for dying for me." Oh my gosh, man. This girl's in first grade. And she just needed help with the spelling. Amazing stuff, right? From the mouth of babes. She said that her grandma told her, and my grandma told me that Easter is not about the bunnies and the eggs. It's about Jesus dying for us. The eggs and the bunnies, that's just fun, but that's not really what it's about. Oh, man. You know how powerful that is? What grandmothers and people tell their children, and how that is ingested by a young mind and then repeated. I mean, she's literally repeating the gospel. There's nothing more amazing than that, you know? So, Charlie, back to that. I'm talking to my Catholic friend, student. I call her my friend, because they are my friends. And she's telling me about it, and I'm like, hey, you know, we shouldn't be doing that, you know, that's not safe, it's not good. And, you know, she was telling me that, you know, the demons are her friends. She wasn't calling them demons, right? She's calling them, like, the spirits. Well, I like them. They're my friends. And I'm like, I'm not saying this, but I'm thinking it. Oh, I know what you're talking about. I know that experience. When I lived in the Hare Krishna temple, I'd be sitting there in the living room watching a religious movie, and there'd be a shadow would just go, whoo, right by you. Whoo, you see a shadow. And anybody who visited there said there was a dark cloud. Many people saw spirits, ghosts, shadows. One person saw like a dog-looking thing in our basement. We don't have any animals. We're not allowed to have dogs, any animals in the temple. And they said they saw like a grotesque-looking prehistoric dog running. I'm like, I don't know. We had somebody ringing the doorbell in the front and the back. Right? We thought it was. We all believed it was the ghost of a devotee who unfortunately hung himself in our backyard. Yeah, he hung himself from a tree in the temple where I lived before I moved in. And anytime we start to talk about him, the front doorbell would ring. You know, and my super logical friend said, "Well, you know, that's not necessarily. It could be faulty wiring. It's always faulty wiring." You know? But meanwhile, the back door bell rings. Ding dong. Nobody's there. We go to nobody's there. Faulty wiring in the front and the back. I mean, I don't wire houses for doorbells, so maybe they're all you know. But to me, it's like sometimes you got to deny the most obvious answer, right? They talk about Occam's razor. The most, you know, simple explanation is probably the most likely. It's a ghost. If you understand spiritual topics and realize that they're real, this is a possibility and it's real, then it's like, you know, I mean, what else does he need to do? Write his name on the window? I mean, so this stuff is real and we should not be calling out to these things. So I understood when I saw those shadows, I remember thinking, ooh, that's my friend. I felt comfort when that shadow walked by. What is that? That's a demon. That's a demon spirit. And I was in communication with these demons as a Hare Krishna. In fact, I would say I was more in communication with the demons as a Hare Krishna than I was before. Because like I said, with the Satan stuff, I didn't really do much with it. It was just kind of like a topic, like, you know, it was kind of cool or whatever, but I didn't really do much, too much. But when I was in Hare Krishna, I'm straight up praying to gods that are demons. The Bible tells me that the gods of the heathens are demons, right? So there was a lot of influence there. So I got to tell my friend, hey, you know, those are not your friends. And she was like kind of having trouble with that. No, I like them and they're my friends. But then, you know, it's like experience plays out and it just teaches itself. So she taught herself, right? Why? Because she was like, well, there was this one time she was telling me, you know, the spirit grabbed my neck and was choking me. And I said, you know, does that sound like your friend? And the wheels are turning. Huh? No. Yeah. Right? God uses these things to show us, right? He allows certain things, and we can learn. And sometimes we just need a more experienced person to say, hey, check that out, right? Think about that. And you're like, huh, didn't think about that before. Thank you. That makes sense. Right? We pay it forward. And she also told me, well, I had asked her, what is your favorite book to read in the Bible? That was really cool. And anyway, I was asking her about the gospel, hey, do you know how Jesus died? Do you know about him? And, she was able to tell me some of the things, yeah, Jesus died on the cross. She got some of the details wrong, but it was really powerful. However, I did notice that the born again girl, first grader, knew the gospel more completely and could articulate it way better. The Catholic girl didn't necessarily articulate the gospel directly, although she knew kind of the outer workings of it, right? She knew kind of the body, the structure, the skeleton, the nuts and bolts of it, right? Okay, Jesus lived, he was perfect, and then he died. And he was nailed to a cross. And it's yeah, but why? Why did he do that? Why did he need to do that? Not necessarily saying someone her age has to know that, She's under the age of accountability. I believe she's saved anyway. But at some point we have to understand these things. So I'm going to end it there, guys. This was a long video. I really appreciate you guys listening to all my thoughts and feelings, and appreciate you being here with me. And if you've been here this long with this video, thank you so much for watching the whole thing to the end. Very long one. I don't know if you guys know, but you can put your speed on YouTube on, you can speed it up, right? You can do 1.5 speed, you can do 2 speed, right? So I listen to all my videos on 1.5 speed or 2. If 2 is too fast, I'll go back down to 1.5. And if it's really meaty and I need to focus, or if I'm listening to music, I put it down to 1, which is the regular speed. So you can always do that with my videos or any in general, and it helps you ingest more information quicker, and you can watch more videos quicker, which is a really cool thing. And if you haven't done it yet, it'll take some time to get used to, but eventually you can start at 1.25 to start. And then, I'm sure you guys know, a lot of you guys know about this, but if you don't, it's amazing once you find that out, because when I found that out, I was like, oh my gosh, right? My life has just changed. Because I was listening on 1 speed and I got tons of videos saved that I want to watch. What's up, man? And hey, brother. Hey. And now I can listen to all of them, and now I'm like, maniac. Listening to all these YouTube videos on 3 and 4 speed. Then sometimes you gotta just chill, listen to some music, and be with God, and read your Bible, right? That's what I gotta do. So thank you guys so much for being here. God bless you. Jesus loves you. Keep coming back. He's coming soon. Let's get ready. Let's do this. I'll meet you in the sky. Peace.